It's been just over a week now since Cyberpunk 2077 came out, since all the corporate reviews and other so-called professionals decided to chip in their thoughts and ultimately give the game an almost universal 9 out of 10. Never mind the fact that many of these outlets would complain about the bugs, the performance issues, the odd design choices or missing features. But nah, 10 out of fucking 10. Why not? Can't possibly go against the grain and upset a few peeps who never read the damn reviews anyway, right? What would our precious corporate overlords think? So fuck it, here's my take. The game's good, it ain't great, it's far from perfect. It's a half-baked mess that could have done with another 6 months, maybe a year in the oven. Rather than get even more jaded and cynical about the underlying reason for why it's crap, I'm just gonna share my 2 cents instead. And as usual, I have made my best attempt to avoid any major spoilers. In general, I feel if you knew nothing about Cyberpunk, heard absolutely nothing but that it was made by the guys who made The Witcher 3, you'd be fine. It's effectively a first-person Witcher 3. It has the same strengths but many of the same issues. The open world is a mile long but only inches deep. Plenty of places to go to and see, but not much reason to other than to kill crap or because some random side quest led you there. While I consider this the stock standard fanfare for open worlds at this point, CDPR claimed throughout the development process that Cyberpunk 2077 would be a major step up from every open world game, and it simply isn't. The story is good, it's compelling, it's engaging, and from time to time does contain many choices CD Projekt Red hyped up as feeling meaningful. The immersion is ruined occasionally whenever the animations decide to bug out, but other than that, it's a solid take. Overall, you can expect the same quality as The Witcher 3, and that includes most of the side quests, which also have a touch of them meaningful choices. If you're in it for a single-player RPG story and that's all you want, then you'll absolutely get your money's worth. Fair warning though, the entire first section is on rails. This could take you anywhere from 2 to 5 hours depending on how much exploring you do, and while you do have a few different ways to sort of roleplay a bit, the reality is the ending of the prologue doesn't change. You'll just have to trust me when I say that the game does open up and actually gets more meaningful later on. To a degree, at least. The game is nowhere near as open as, say, the Outer Worlds or Fallout New Vegas, where you can go in guns blazing from the get-go and only stop when everyone is dead. The Outer Worlds is much like Morrowind in that the game can still be played no matter how many people you kill. And while the gameplay left much to be desired, the dialogue system was extremely robust and allowed for multiple different types of characters. Fallout New Vegas is an even better example. Cyberpunk though? Not so much. For the most part, you're going to be Night City's bitch, and only when the game lets you off your metaphorical hook do you get to finally go in guns blazing and rid the world of the pricks who fucked you over. If the game lets you, because sometimes it simply won't. The choices you are given will often have multiple outcomes, yeah, but there are distinct moments in the game where I would have loved to just pull my gun and start firing instead of dealing with some corpo's bullshit, but I can't, because the game simply won't let me. That wasn't a thing in the Outer Worlds, a game that never blocked further story progress behind my ability to make terrible decisions. Romance options, for those who are into that sort of thing, are weak. There's only 4 major options, many characters who'd be fitting aren't available at all, there are 2 gay and 2 straight options, both are gender dependent, which is fucking moronic. All bi would have been far better because bi-inclusive is gay-inclusive without fucking over everyone else. It's not a major deal breaker for me because I find video game romances trite and meaningless, but again, it's yet one more example of how limited you actually are. Life paths also don't matter. They're pure marketing wank that heavily implied that have a much bigger impact on the story than they really do. They're all about 20 minutes long and culminate in the exact same overall starting situation. The key difference is that you'll sometimes get specific dialogue options pertaining to your chosen life path. These are mostly for flavor and generally do not change the overall outcome of a given quest. It's fine, and I think it's a nice thing overall, but it's not something you should ever stress over all that much. At best, pick a life path based on the sort of backstory you're more interested in hearing about. Corpo, for instance, gets a fair few options that it can explain some areas, locations, and corporate backstory you might not otherwise find out about. Same applies for Nomad and Street Kid. These are interesting, but on their own not enough to consider replaying through the entire game for. There's better reasons for that. Sorry, but if you are expecting to be a corporate assassin because you chose the Corpo life path, yeah, that's not happening. The last thing I'll mention around the storyline is that Keanu Reeves as Johnny Silverhand is pretty much as awesome as that sounds. I don't necessarily think Keanu is the best voice actor in the world, his voice just lacks any kind of emotional range, but the deadpan style he's accustomed to really grew on me throughout the game. There's a few spots here and there where it's especially noticeable. The random outbursts, bouts of cynical sarcasm and banter are all just nicely done. I personally love listening to whatever the total asshole has to say, cause yeah, Johnny Silverhand's a total dick. As for the gameplay itself, there's good things and there's bad things. Character creation is a joke. Character customization in general is quite poor. Creating your character's appearance is virtually pointless since you can count almost on one hand the amount of times you'll actually get to see them, most of which are in mirrors. If you ride a bike, you can look at the back of your head, so there's that, I guess. This is likely one of many features that we've stripped down to try and get the game to release this decade, and it coincides with the decision they made last year to remove third-person cinematics. It's a shame too, because the animations can be very good when they're working properly. I'm surprised at how much detail there is, but it contrasts heavily with the sections where detail is lacking. To put it in perspective, Skyrim has a far more robust system than Cyberpunk does, and in Skyrim you'll never see your character unless you deliberately go into third person. Cyberpunk has a distinct lack of hair options, a distinct lack of colour options for what little hair it has, not to mention it's hard to determine what a colour actually is until you click on it since they don't match up with the icon. Colour options in general are just limited. Is there a good reason to limit colour options and not just give us an RGB slider? Why can't I have pink here, for example? None of the options that look like pink are actually pink. Yet I can have pink teeth, even though you're never gonna see them. There's a distinct lack of beard options. You get fuck all tattoo, piercing and cybernetic options, and those are the only real extraneous customization you even get, unless you count your dick size. Which is just as pointless because you can count the amount of times you'll ever actually see your genitals on one hand. It's a frivolous feature that was clearly added back when CDPR's ambition was bigger than their ability to act on it. But hey, at least you have a decent variety of pupil appearances. It's fucking awesome, sure. Too bad you won't see it 90% of the time anyway. But the worst part is you have no control over the actual shape and structure of your appearance. You cannot carefully articulate specific features like nose or jaw shape, how your eyebrows look, how full your cheeks are or not, your neck size, etc. Things that even Fallout 4 has at this point. Another classic Bethesda title where you'll basically never actually see your character. And yet, all Cyberpunk has is preset options you can sift through. Yes, there's a few, but none of them are perfect. Other than that, you have a variety of guns, a slew of different armor choices, a selection of cyberware to upgrade your elite hacker skills, and other in-combat toys, and the ability to augment the shit out of all of them with equipment, mods, skills, and perks. As far as actual in-game character progression goes, I'm impressed. It's far more comprehensive than the Witcher games were, and generally far deeper than most other open-world RPGs, including games such as Skyrim or Horizon Zero Dawn. In general, the game's gearing system feels similar to a looter shooter like Borderlands or Destiny in that you'll find gear constantly and sift through it to see which one is better. On the topic of sifting through loot, the inventory system is shit. Just total ass. Selling items is a nightmare as you have to do it one at a time, and every single time the entire screen flashes. You can't just mark items as junk like you can in Borderlands and then sell them all at once. You also can't mass dismantle items either. You can dismantle stacks of individual items but not multiple different item types, and working with multiple items is a chore in and of itself because there's no shortcut controls to select all or none of them. You have to slide to the max every time. Gearing has other issues too. There's no transmog system, you cannot change the appearance of your gear. It's kind of pointless anyway since as said you can't see your character half the time, but it would have been nice to not look like I was trying to cosplay Bruno Mars. If you use the best gear you find, you're gonna look like you're playing an MMO from 2006 with that sweet ass clown gear. Thankfully that's not much of an issue as we'll get back to later. The second issue is that many perks and skill trees are just straight up broken, either because they don't work or they work too well. Trying to level up athletics is impossible since it basically gets no XP, whereas other skills like Cold Blood do get XP, but who knows how because the game doesn't tell you. Then you have perks that just don't work like the health regen one, even if the stats screen shows you have it. Crafting is also weak and not worth spending points in. The amount of items you'll have to craft to level up the skill is astronomical, and you have to craft them one at a time, even for consumables like health kits and grenades. If you do invest in crafting perks, you'll quickly discover the crafting economy is completely fucked. Rare items require epic crafting materials, epic requires legendary. Sure, there's a perk to upgrade them, but that itself is a chore to do, and by the time you come close to crafting anything decent, you'll either be better off just waiting until the next tier, or you'll have found something better on the many corpses you will inevitably loot. Then there's quick hacks, the cyberpunk equivalent to magic. It's completely overpowered, but you won't start noticing until you've at least upgraded your cyberware's operating system. It eventually becomes possible to hack people through objects because why the fuck not? And once you can do that, you're basically unstoppable. Enemies might be slightly alerted, but they won't trigger other enemies or alarms unless they have physical line of sight to you. This also makes tech weapons quite powerful. Guns in Cyberpunk come under 3 categories: power, tech, and smart. Power weapons have ricochet rounds, and with a cybernetic upgrade you can see the round's pathway to better abuse this effect. Tech weapons can be charged for more damage and penetrate barriers, while smart weapons have lock-on micro projectiles. All of these are fun in their own right, but nothing beats tech, for 2 reasons. Tech guns have their own perks to increase damage of tech-specific weapons, which stacks with the weapon perk themselves, but, more importantly, they shoot through walls. You get the ability to ping enemies' locations very early in the game, and this lets you see a solid outline of that target through barriers, combined with tech, and who needs line of sight? Overall, it's a fun experience, and I really enjoy the different types of guns. Melee, on the other hand, we'll ignore, because fuck melee. If you know me at all, you'll know my stance on melee, but Cyberpunk melee is basically Skyrim melee. You spam left click, maybe hold down to do a power attack every once in a while, and you can block. You can also dodge, but you can do this with guns too, so who gives a fuck? And really, when most of the enemies have guns, what's dodging gonna do? If you really want a melee, you want to get a pair of Mantis blades, because nothing screams Cyberpunk like stabbing someone with your fucking arms. Hey man, if Adam Jensen can do it, why the fuck can't I? But enough about that, let's talk about the AI and difficulty. The difficulty settings don't matter, they don't change the AI, they just make enemies bullet sponges and make you a wet blanket. Normal is too easy, hard is a bit too hard. Nothing majorly challenging, but again, when all the options do is make you do less damage, what's the matter? Just play on normal and enjoy the ride. Playing on normal also means you can pretty much just wear whatever you like and go for pure fashion punk, the way the dystopian corporate gods intended. As for the AI, it's a mixed bag. The AI can be smart and use tech weapons to their full advantage, so it's not just you shooting through walls. They'll also bum rush you if they're melee, but they won't flank or try to gain advantage using terrain. They'll sometimes lob grenades, but not enough to concern you, and they'll never get in a car chase, ever. This means cop chases are a complete bust, which is unfortunate because I love running around with wanted stars and Grand Theft Auto having elongated car chases. It's fun sometimes, but in Cyberpunk they just don't bother. You can get a wanted star for basically anything but run 100 foot or so and they'll stop bothering. Now you know why Night City has a crime rate of like 50 murders per capita. The cops are all lazy shits. The moment you get a wanted star, cops just magically spawn in, and they don't stop spawning until you're out of range, and they pretty much never chase you even on foot. Any kind of car chase you get into is 100% scripted, and it sucks because they feel pretty damn dope. Frankly, it's worse than GTA 3, which actually did have cop chases. I mean, fuck me man, the first GTA had cops chase after you. Let's carry on right to visuals and music. Music is good, I guess. The main music is banging, as Doom 2016 feels, but I was expecting way more synth pop or synth wave. Combat music is also great, but again, it has less a Blade Runner feel and more a Doom one. Gets you pumped, sure, but not in the same way. The radios are fine, but have a tendency to just not work half the time, and they don't matter if you ain't driving. The visuals are where many people see problems, depending on who you ask. I haven't had as bad experience as some people have had, but it's been bad enough that it ruins immersion every time it happens. I've had cars explode randomly, trees and people just ragdoll out of nowhere, objects will float around mid-air during conversation, sometimes those objects are my arms. Performance is also a mixed bag. It's hard to describe this because people have different definitions of what is good performance and what isn't. If you're a console player, 30 frames per second might be fine, and I can't speak for the console version because I don't have it. I've heard it's so terrible, CDPR have apologised and offered refunds. The real sin when it comes to how poorly CDPR has treated last gen is the fact that not only did they refuse to send out review copies for the last gen versions, but they blatantly lied back when they said that Cyberpunk 2077 runs surprisingly well on them. This isn't even a lie by omission, it's just them actively lying. Ugh. In any case, my requirements are a solid 60 plus frames per second at all times. And while I can get that, I had to do some bizarre hex editing and config file hacks to do it. Driving can feel the worst as that can stutter the most from all the assets loading in all the time. It doesn't help that many of the graphics options just don't do anything, which you can check out for yourself by watching Digital Foundry's optimization guide. I'm conflicted on how to feel, because on the one hand, I was hoping for more. I was expecting a lot more, actually. Particularly when the studio itself marketed it as
the most believable city in any open-world game to date.
It is not. It is patently, demonstrably, provably, and every other word you can pull from the thesaurus to describe how wrong that statement is. But on the other hand, the story is amazing and it basically just plays out like The Witcher 3 in first person with guns. And I can have fun with that. And the fact is, if all you do is play the campaign and call it a day, then yeah, you'll probably have some fun with it. But the moment you peek behind the curtain and try to discover what the open world is like, you will slowly realize just how static and empty Night City actually is. It's a husk without a soul, a pretty veneer to mask the complete lack of anything meaningful, and it takes some serious mental delusion to even begin to defend this game and the studio behind it, who quite clearly rushed it to make a quick buck over the holidays. The fact is, CD Projekt Red hyped this game up as one of the most immersive open-world role-playing games to date, and yet the entire world is so utterly, horrifically static. It's fun to laugh at the silly conversations NPCs had in the Elder Scrolls series, but at the time, their daily routines felt real, even when they all sounded the same. Cyberpunk has fuck all of that. Nothing changes. If it rains, nobody pulls out an umbrella. If you shoot at someone, they all just cower and don't even try to run or defend themselves. The cops spawn out of nowhere forever and never try to chase you down very far. You can stop entire lanes of traffic just by parking in front of them, and no one will ever try to go around or even through you. There is meaningful dialogue, but you'll feel railroaded into role-playing a personality you might not have wanted to go for. Want to be a corpo asshole? Yeah, good luck. At best, you're a neutral piece of shit. All I really wanted was a mix of both Grand Theft Auto and Skyrim, but honestly, I didn't get either. As always, my friends, my name is MrTastix. If you enjoyed what you see, then smash the shit out of that like and subscribe button. And thanks for watching.